Hello everyone, I'm Extra Cheesy 87 and this is our first bonus video, or maybe also our only bonus video for Trails of Cold Steel 3. We're going to read our books, our mini books that we have neglected to read. Now, this is an older save because I wanted music that wasn't super ominous and or overpowering, so I loaded a save here. We'll have to load another save to actually read the final part of Heartless Edgar, and one of these others I think we were missing? I can't remember. Maybe it's just the one last Heartless Edgar we're missing in this save. This is a save like in the middle of like chapter 4, just because I don't know, all the music for the final chapter, none of it was really good background music. Do you play the same song in here? I assume so, right? I don't know if anywhere else has different music. But I mean, this track is fine. Alright, it's time for Kurt Vander to read everyone a bedtime story. Also, something else that I noticed when I was loading my save earlier, because originally I loaded just my last save, which was right here, that the final area is actually called Twilight's Birth, which is kind of cool. You know, the little, if you look on the map on this little final screen here. I'm not going to load it because then I won't be able to find this save again, but because all my saves are all freaking all whacked out. They're all kinds of messed up, man. I need more save slots. Alright, let's get down to it. Take a sip of the sauce first before we get started. Alright. Chapter 1, Autumn Dawn. Rays of light spilled through the curtains, brightening the walls of the bedroom before finally coming to rest on my face. I slowly opened my bleary eyes and made my way to the window. I gently touched my fingertips against the dew-covered glass, feeling the sun's warmth. I turned around to see you still lying in bed, asleep. Your tranquil expression was illuminated by the same dawn light that had stirred me from my slumber. I moved in close, pressing my nose against yours, but you didn't stir. I gently stroked your hair, but you still refused to wake. In one final attempt to rouse you, I pinched your cheek, but all you did was make a face and roll over. Gently chuckling to myself, I straightened the bed sheets and left the room. I went to the kitchen and began warming up the soup left over from last night. Next, I started making the salads you were going to have for lunch later. Lettuce, ham, and hard-boiled eggs. You could leave one of those out. I cut up a tomato, taking care only to add the slices of one to the salads. Or slices to one of the salads. After all, you don't like tomatoes based. By God, they're based. I remember you telling me the story. I think I was about 4 years old. My father tried to feed me a tomato and I just spat it back out at him. I have no idea why, I just can't eat them. You laughed and looked away, a twinge of guilt playing across your eyes. Just as I was finishing up with the food, I saw the bedroom door swing open. Good morning, you said, stretching. It was clear you'd enjoy your doze. Hey, Edgar, you looked at me. Edgar, you called my name. Edgar! You call my name over and over. Hey, Edgar! You... Huh? My eyelids snapped open. My ears were suddenly filled with sound. This is such a weird perspective. It's like first, second person. I was in a restaurant in town. Sitting across from me was my friend, Henry. His long green hair was unkempt as though he just rolled out of bed. A small trail of steam rose upward from the hot plate of food he had in front of him. I instantly understood what was going on. Can I get you some water? The waitress Clementine was standing over us. I looked up into her eyes. They were as clear and blue as a summer sky. Oh, yeah, Henry started to say. No, we're okay. Don't worry about us, I interrupted. Clementine looked confused but stepped away to see to other customers. What do you mean, don't worry about us? What if I'm thirsty? Henry furrowed his brow at me. I don't want to bother her, I said, glancing in Clementine's direction for the briefest moment. Bother? It's just a glass of water, man. Henry sighed and began sullenly chomping on his food. Here, have mine too. I pushed the plate bearing my untouched sandwich towards him. My head's all muddled. I don't think I have much of an appetite anymore. Hasn't happened a lot lately. You okay, man? Henry's dour expression turned to one of concern. I'm not sure. I keep getting flashes of this one scene. It feels like a memory, but I don't recognize it at all. I raised my gaze and stole another glance at Clementine as she walked through the restaurant, smiling and talking to the customers. Henry followed my gaze towards her and a look of understanding came over his face. Now you think about it, it all started if you first noticed her, huh? I should have known. I've seen the side eyes of a lovesick fool before. Nodded to himself knowingly. Is that what it is? I questioned Henry, yet I couldn't take my eyes off Clementine. Well, you know me best, Henry. As I spoke, Clementine noticed my gaze and gave me a warm smile before returning to her work. Actually, she thought she was fucking creepy. Since I don't seem to know myself anymore, I sighed. All my dearest friend could give in response was a troubled chuckle. Wait, 1294, isn't that like super far in the future? We sci-fi? Lamont, home to the headquarters of the Epstein Foundation. I planned to devote my time here to performing research alongside the other members of the Foundation, but then I fell in love, right? Like, I'm not like dumb. Okay, I'm not dumb. Cool. I mean, like, I 100% knew what year it is in game, but I was like, I'm not confident in myself. I don't want to get made fun of. Chapter 2, My Name. When did my feelings for Clementine first start? I couldn't remember the exact day. All I knew was that for whatever reason... Oh yeah, bro, Edgar, what happens in CS4? Tell us how to stop the Great Twilight! When did my feelings for Clementine first start? I couldn't remember the exact day. All I knew was that for whatever reason I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every day I'd found myself going to the restaurant. Once I got there, I'd spend my meal watching her, gazing at her flaxen braids, swinging by her as she flitted to and fro. I wonder what she thought about me. That you're a stalker? Did she like my voice? Did she think I was handsome? Did she feel the same way I did? These thoughts would bubble up in my mind, then fade away. Hey, people don't like it when you stare at them like some kind of creepy, you know? Henry interrupted my thoughts with his usual blunt tone. We were at the restaurant just like any other day. I'm not a creeper, I said, briefly tearing my eyes off of Clementine. He flashed a look that told me he was unimpressed with my response. Look, I come here every day, and you just sit in a corner and stare at her. At this rate, I'm worried that they're going to toss you in jail for stalking. They'll throw me in there too as your accomplice. Is coming by here every day all it takes you to be a stalker ass? No, but that's not the issue. Wait, why am I even explaining this to you? Henry's frustration with me was clearly mounting. Because we're pals, I answered. He left out an exaggerated sigh and threw his hands over to defeat. After a moment, however, he put on a serious expression and leaned in towards me. But for real, man, what are you gonna do? Do you really just plan to come here day after day? Yeah, I can't really think of anything else to do. I shrugged. Henry shook his head at me. Come on, man, that's not how you're gonna get your feelings across to her. And what do I gotta do? I asked. You just gotta tell her how you feel. Just go over there and say it. Brace yourself for the worst and just say, Henry told me to. But I guess if you're too scared for that, the safe way would be to make her like you more first. How do I do that? Should I struggled to think of something that lovers do. Hold her in my arms or something like that? Are you for real, man? Henry raised an eyebrow at me. Okay. If I were to give an example at the top of my head, is this how you treat a paying customer? Suddenly, Henry is interrupted by the sound of a drunk man yelling at someone on the other side of the restaurant. I looked over to see who he was so riled up at. It was Clementine. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm working right now. I can't do that, she said. I could hear a hint of fear behind her professional tone. All I'm asking for is you to have a little drink with me. Come on, girlie, let's have some fun. The man slurred his words, clearly deep in his cups. Well, something like that, actually, Henry nodded, the scene playing out before us. You swoop in to save the day when she's in trouble like that, I'm sure she'll think better of you. Though you should probably stay out of this one, to be honest. Henry leaned back in his chair and pulled out a comm orbit. This might be a bit more than you can handle, so we better leave it to the pros. Okay, got it. I stood up and began walking towards Clementine. Hey, wait! I heard Henry exclaim as I left, but I ignored him and kept going. In this episode, Edgar gets fucking stabbed. Huh? Who are you supposed to be? Me and Lady are talking. You can have your turn later. I could smell the alcohol in his breath from an arc away. I'm here to talk to you, actually. As I said this, the man's unfocused gaze froze on me. I'd rather not bother the other customers in here, so why don't we talk outside, I continued. Huh? Got nothing to talk to you about. You wanna go outside, go on your own. Like I said, I'm talking to the lady here. The man's face grew redder. But she clearly doesn't want to talk to you, so let's go outside already, I retorted. The man's expression quickly twisted into an enraged scowl as he shot out of his seat, knocking over everything on his table with a loud clatter. It turned out he was much bigger than me. Don't try and act big, you little shit, you're gonna get hurt. Please go back to your seat. I can handle this, Clementine said as she put herself between the man and me. But you're shaking. With her right in front of me, I was able to see clearly. Tears welled up in her eyes and she pursed her lips tightly and gave me a determined look. I'm not moving from this spot until you go back. Her voice cracked ever so slightly. Yeah, I guess I'll have to move you then. The man shoved Clementine aside and grabbed at my collar. At the same time, he swung his fist at my face. Right as he was about to make impact, however, I heard a commotion from behind. That's enough! Several sets of hands grabbed him, stopping his punch mid-swing and holding him in place. Got a report of a disturbance. Both of you, stand down! One look at their shining badge was all I needed to figure out what was going on. We're from the Bracer Guild. You're coming back with us to our guild branch, and we're gonna all have a nice chat, said one of the Bracers. Bracers, hold on a sec, we were fighting. The man quickly let go of me. You guys having a bit of fun, right, kid? Well, I sure wasn't having any fun. It was an honest answer on my part, but the man didn't seem to appreciate it much. His face turned red again and contorted with anger. Hell, you shut your damn mouth, little punk! Before the man could do anything, however, the Bracers had him pinned to the floor. And then they executed him. That's enough. Come along quietly. The Bracers subdued him and began leading him out of the restaurant. Despite his anger only a moment ago, the man began sobbing. But please don't call my mama, okay? I'm begging you. I mean, I've been thinking this dude's like 40 years old. I walked him walk out the door. Just as I was able to turn and check on Clementine, one of the Bracers put his hands on my shoulder. He was a well-built man, and it was clear from his expression he took his job seriously. I would later learn his name was Boris. You guys are lifesavers, I turned to him and said, thank you for taking care of him. We have to bring you in too, you know, Boris said as he tightened his grip on my shoulder. After all, both parties are to blame when a fight breaks out. Didn't they teach you that in school? What kind of no-tolerance ass bullshit is this? Both parties, huh? I said absent-mindedly. Everything that had gone on the past few minutes had overwhelmed my mind a bit. As I was lost in my daze, Boris sent me out of the restaurant with the other Bracers. After Edgar left the restaurant with the Bracers, Clementine just stood there, shocked. Sheesh, sorry about my commotion, my pal calls, said a voice from behind her. Sometimes he gets so stubborn, not even I can stop him. He just runs off and does whatever he likes. It can be kind of a pain. It was Henry. He let out a chuckle at the results of Edgar's clumsy attempt at heroism. Clementine simply stared at the door Edgar had been escorted through moments ago. However, noticing this, Henry's laughing tapered off awkwardly. You okay? Who is he? She asked. Huh? Your friend, what's his name? Clementine continued to gaze at the doorway she asked. Oh, right, Henry stammered, slightly flustered by the unexpected question. It's, Edgar. Edgar. Clementine mumbled to herself. I didn't get to thank him. Watching Clementine lost in her thoughts, Henry could only manage a wry grin. Chapter 3, The Setting Sun. The Bracers' questioning went by quickly, and they released me once I was able to explain the situation. The other man was released as well, though not before a stern lecture. Geez, you're a real pain, you know that? When I ran into Henry the next day, he was really annoyed with me. I told you to wait, didn't I? He said, the crease in his forehead growing. What would you have done if you got hurt butting in like that? What even possessed you to jump in anyway? Usually Henry didn't lay into me like this until much later in the day. Clementine was in trouble. You told me if I helped her, she'd like me, right? I responded. A flash of anger spread across Henry's face. This was his usual reaction when my matter-of-fact responses got under his skin. Sure enough, it was quickly replaced with his usual look of exhausted resignation. After you left, she asked for your name, and I told her. Oh, thanks. Despite my dull response to Henry, my mind started racing. Yeah, you've just gone from just another customer to that crazy guy who almost got beaten up, he said with a half of a smirk. She is disappointed she didn't get the chance to thank you. Really? My head started swimming at the news. When I stepped into that argument, I could see she was shaking, I said, thinking back. Well, of course she was, Henry said. Anyone would have been scared in a situation like that. She must have a pretty strong will to have kept her cool like that. Yeah, I said. I think she's a strong woman. Something like that happens again, I wouldn't be there to help her. Yeah? Henry shot me a sardonic look. Well, I'm not gonna save your ass next time. Huh? My head suddenly stopped swimming, and the gears of my brain started turning at full speed. You're the one who called the Bracers, I said, thinking back to the night before. I had seen him taking his comm orbit out before I got up. Yep, just glad I got there before someone got his face caved in, he grinned. You're a real pain in the ass, Henry, but you're a good guy at heart, I smiled back at him. Right? He started to laugh before realizing what precisely I'd said. Wait just a sec, who's the pain in the ass here? I really like this one so far. I love how dialogue heavy it is. I went to the restaurant that afternoon. Clementine noticed me come in and hurried over. This way I'll show you your seat, she said with a smile. I followed her to the corner of the restaurant. A table had been set up for away from the other customers. I was a little worried you wouldn't come back after what happened yesterday, she said sheepishly. Don't worry, something like that isn't enough to scare me off, I laughed. What about you? How are you doing? Yeah, because he's a professional stalker, alright? He's gonna need more than a, scuffle and a restraining order and a, police intervention to stop him. I feel terrible, she said, hanging her head a little. Maybe if I'd handled things better, you wouldn't have been dragged off by the Bracers. That wasn't your fault. I jumped in because I felt like it, I said, puffing out my chest, just the tiniest bit. But, she started. Besides, you stood in the way to protect me too, right? I smiled at her. We helped each other out. She smiled back, blushing ever so slightly. Even so, I still want to show you my gratitude. Today, your meal's in the house, so get whatever you like. Same goes for your friend. Clementine quickly looked around, realizing Henry wasn't with me. Oh, he just couldn't make it today, I said, so I guess I'll eat his meal too. Both of us burst into laughter. By the time I left the restaurant, the sun was setting. Thanks again for the meal, I said. I really enjoyed myself. Clementine walked me to the entrance. I'm glad to hear it. To be honest, I was worried you might have been bored. You had this dreamy look of sorts on your face. What? No, there's no way I could have been bored. After all, I mean... I stumbled over my words and trailed off. Clementine tilted her head at me, confused by my babbling. I mean, the weather's so nice today? Yeah, that's it. I stammered out the first thing that popped into my mind, but it just confused her further. Huh? What does that have to do with anything, she asked. I guess it doesn't. I broke down into nervous laughter, but Clementine just giggled along with me. You're so funny, Edgar. I hope you come back soon. I'll be waiting for you, she said. Bro, this shit's so made up. They would just think you're a fucking weirdo. I'll be waiting too. Anything you need, just let me know. You can count on me whenever, I told her. Huh? She still seemed a little confused, but she smiled at me. Right, I'll just do just that. I'm serious, I said. I want to be there for you, anytime you need me. Coming off way too strong? She let out a little gasp. They were a little roundabout, but my words had gotten through to her. If you'll excuse me then, I gave her one more smile before I headed out. I began walking home, but after a moment I heard someone call my name from behind me. I turned around to see you there, waving at me. Your bright smile shone all the more brilliantly as the golden light of the setting sun washed over you. Chapter 4, Where the Fireflies Are. I wound my way through the Layla Canyon, several arg outside town. The town's cliffs towered above me, stretching up to the sky. This was the reason why, despite being mid-morning, it felt so dark down in the canyon. I felt as though I was shut away from the rest of the world. The great, wide sky was compressed to a thin strip of azure, zigzagging overhead. As I looked up, I saw two birds fly by far above me. Seeing them, I thought back to my conversation with her the day before. You ever heard of the firefly fungus? Clementine asked, but she brought us to our dinner. Seen them once or twice, never eaten one though. Henry said between mouthfuls of food. Is it a kind of fungus that looks like fireflies, or is it fungus that grows on fireflies? I asked. Henry, in the middle of a big gulp of water, did a spit take, spraying watery bits of his dinner here and there. What kind of question is that? He coughed up more of his drink. You really think there are fireflies, a bunch of fungus going all over them, man? That'd be gross. I actually thought there were fireflies like that, but I kept it to myself. Are you a researcher? Lately, I've been thinking of making a new dish with some more exotic ingredients like firefly fungus, Clementine explained, as she cleaned up Henry's mess. I'm able to whip something up. How would you like to try it? What, No, it wasn't firefly fungus, right? Isn't one of Freddy's ingredients? It's something, it's like fungus of some sort, right? I don't think it's called firefly fungus, though. I'm able to whip something up. How would you like to try it? Of course, I responded instantly. Henry stared at me dumbfounded. You signed up for that real quick. For all you know, these mushrooms can be straight up nasty. Mystery Food X. Hearing that, Clementine frowned angrily. It was actually pretty rare to see her like that. They won't be after I'm done with him. I promise I'll make something extra delicious. But you can't even get them in this town, right? Said Henry. I'm sure someone's selling them somewhere, but you really gotta make a cross-state trek every time you run low of ingredients? Oh, Clementine said, looking a bit dejected. I still haven't figured that part out. She excused herself and hurried back into the kitchen. That wasn't very nice, Henry, I said, glaring at him. Can you really not find anything around here? Oh, whoops. Who knows, he shrugged. There's a forest part past the canyon until it's possible. I instantly shot up out of my seat and turned to leave, but Henry's reflexes were too fast. He grabbed my arm, stopping me. You can go out once it's light out, he said with a sigh. To taking his advice, I set out for Layla Canyon first thing in the morning. Then he got attacked by Jaegers. Who were actually, it's old man Kurt in disguise. Once again, he's still at it again. Back in his old wily ways. As I walked, you thought I didn't remember what Layla Sil was. You were like, oh, he probably doesn't even remember Layla Sil from Sky 2. I do. As I walked, the steep canyon wall slowly parted, and before long, I found myself standing in front of a verdant forest. Henry had told me to look. Layla Sil is from the tutorial Sky 2, right? Oh no. Henry had told me to look in especially shadowy parts of the forest or around rotting trees. I made my way through the forest, picking anything even vaguely mushroom-shaped. It didn't even take long for the bag I had brought with me had grown heavy with a cornucopia of different mushrooms. I figured if I couldn't find a firefly fungus or Clementine, I'd at least give her a variety of other mushrooms to choose from. But like, what if they're all evil mushrooms that make you not alive anymore? As I continued my search through the forest, I came across a clearing and was struck by how beautiful and tranquil it was. A little stream quietly wound its way through the trees. Rays of sunlight filtered through the treetops, shone down, glittering on the surface of the water. A number of squirrels and small birds were perched on the trees above me, chittering and chirping merrily. It was a scene straight out of a painting, more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen in my days working at the Foundation. Oh, it's rare to see anyone all the way out here. I heard the sound of rustling leaves and turned to see an old man step out of a thicket. Driving along, young man? He asked me. Trying to outrun a spot of heartbreak, are we? Maybe you're looking for something. I stared at the old man. Beneath his head of short white hair, I spotted a few long green strands poking out here and there. He averted his eyes and nervously cleared his throat. Well, as for me, I'm here to pick mushrooms, he said. Seems like someone's got to all of them first, though. I continued to glare wordlessly at the old man. Beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. He cleared his throat again. What you got that in your bag there? He asked. Could it be mushrooms, perhaps? So you're trying to strike a bargain? I finally spoke. Yes, exactly, he exclaimed. I like a youngster who understands. So about that firefly, what is you looking at for way out here? Firefly fungus, I curtly responded. Well, he said proudly, I just so happen to have one right here. He held out a mushroom with a faint green glow to it. Went to some trouble finding this, be sure to use it well, he said. Sure, thanks, I said, taking the mushroom from his hand and turning to leave. What? Wait just a minute, he called out. As I walked away, the old man quickly grabbed my arm, stopping me. It was a familiar feeling, a much stronger grip than an actual old man would have. So is it actually just Henry pretending to be an old man? I thought it was like going to be like his dad or something. But I guess the idea that he would have white hair and some green hair doesn't really make sense, so it's just a wig. That's all we agreed on. You need to give me that bag in exchange, he said. I didn't agree to anything, I told him. You just gave this to me. What? That's not fair, he stammered. You think you can treat an old man like that? Oh, you're pretty strong for an old man. I gave him an unimpressed look, the same kind he'd given me at least once nearly every day. Henry blanched at my words, and the white wig he was wearing fell slightly askew on his head. Look, just let me have the mushrooms. You're going to try and get to her dishes too, I told him. Oh, wait. Look, just let me have the mushrooms. You're going to get to try her dishes too, I told him. Shut up, man. I just want my share for helping you, he snapped at me. And he started grabbing at the firefly fungus and attempted to take it back. We began bickering like a pair of children. Give it back! No, let go! Not until you give it back! Unfortunately, we didn't realize how our fight would end until it was too late. In one final attempt to rip the mushroom out from each other's hands, we let out a small yell and pulled as hard as we could. It took us a moment afterwards to regain our senses, and to our horror, we saw the mushroom had torn in two. An awkward silence fell over us as we stared at the pieces in our hands. We picked ourselves up and silently headed back into town. As we left the forest, we headed back into the canyon. The sun was beginning to hang low in the sky. You know, Sonny, this trip was a bit rough on this old man's knees, Henry piped up. I wouldn't mind if you carried me back to town. You're pretty spry. I think you can make it on your own, I told him curtly. Henry sighed and abandoned his old man facade, picking up his pace. We returned to our silence, each of us absorbed in complicated anger. However, it wasn't long until a voice snapped back to reality. And there went gravity. You there, halt! What's that you have there? I turned to look at whoever it was who had spoken to us, only to be greeted by a familiar face. What were you up to today? You both have leaves in your hair, Clementine asked as she brought us our dinner later that evening. I pulled a vibrant green leaf out from my ear. I hadn't noticed it there at all. It had been an exhausting day. Oh, remember how we were talking about firefly mushrooms yesterday? Clementine said. I decided not to use them after all. I was trying to think of a way I could make with them. I think about what I could make with them, but I couldn't come up with anything good. She gave me a sheepish smile. I guess everything turned out fine in the end, I said with a small, tired grin. Yeah, I guess so, muttered an exhausted Henry. Huh? Clementine tilted her head at us in confusion. Henry and I spent the rest of the night burying our sorrows in food. Earlier that evening, it was a bracer, Boris, who'd called out to us in the canyon. The same Boris who led me away after the fight in the restaurant. Henry and I were so preoccupied, we'd crossed the border between the sightseeing area and the Bracer's training facility without realizing it. We were given a stern lecture, and of course, all the mushrooms I picked were confiscated. Kind of a dick move. Boris, what the fuck, man? 18 pages, what the hell? Chapter 5, Real Trust. They've got a prescription for fishing? Hey, those sharks didn't have another training facility around here, do they? Henry asked. If you keep talking like that, they won't help you next time you're in trouble, I responded, keeping my eyes on the water. Man, who cares? Henry huffed. They're just a bunch of stubborn hard-ass who stomp all over hard people's work. He began, or people's hard work. Hard people's work is a different connotation, I suppose. He began fidgeting as he riled himself up, thinking about the other day. Didn't it tick you off too? He turned to me. You picked all those mushrooms and they just took them away. Well, we broke the rules, I shrugged. Man, I can't be so nonchalant about it, he sighed. He didn't have the energy to be annoyed at me today. I'm getting nothing here. He gave his line a sad tug. I can't focus anymore. Don't they ever get hungry, I asked, looking out at my own line. I hadn't moved the whole time we've been out there. Are we even doing this right? Henry asked. It was a good question, one I didn't have the answer to. A small breeze gently nudged our otherwise immobile fishing lines. Okay, Henry said, getting up. I'm gonna go find someone who can help us. He left his fishing pole and started walking further up the riverbank. We were back in Layla's Hill Canyon. After our disastrous mushroom hunting mission, we had pulled ourselves together and decided to go fishing in an attempt to catch something good for Clementine. After a while, Henry returned with company. For things like this, it's best to get help from a pro, he explained, so I found us one. From his hat and jacket to his rod, the tackle box slung over his shoulder, the man Henry brought back with him was the very picture of an expert angler. I found fishing just a bit upstream, Henry said. He said he's from the Fisherman's Guild. Can't get much more of an expert opinion than that. The fisherman smiled. I'm always happy to help out young anglers like you, he said. We exchanged greetings, then it was time to get down to business. So what exactly are you two after today, the fisherman asked. A rare fish, I told him. I want to give it to someone. That's a little vague, he scratched his chin. I'm definitely on board with giving out a fish as a gift. If you're after something rare, though, you'll need the right bait. The fisherman picked up our poles and examined them. Progress rods, He furrowed his brow a little. That's all we were able to rent in town, sir, I told him. Are we really going to call him sir? Henry whispered to me. What bait are you using? The fisherman asked. Worms? I replied. The fisherman raised an eyebrow, then he shook his head. Are you sure you're trying to catch a big one? He asked. We thought we'd get some bites if we came around lunchtime, I told him, matter-of-factly. The fisherman heard this, his other eyebrows quickly shot up to join the first one. Then he gave an incredulous sigh and pulled a spare rod out of his pack. Here, use this. It's a metal rod trident. It's basically made for catching big fish, he said, handing me the fishing rod. Use live, medium-sized fish as bait. Oh no, it's flashbacks to sky fishing. Oh no. They don't have any new rods either. It's the same name for the rods. It's 100 in-game years, or 100 years. Almost. What about me? Asked Henry. What do I do? You'll be catching the bait fish, the fisherman told him. You can use worms for that one, but you'll need to go to another spot to catch it. Henry seemed to be a bit disappointed he got the less important job, but he did as I was told and moved a bit downstream. You should get a bite from the little ones over there in no time, the fisherman called out. Sure enough, after a minute or two, I heard Henry struggling. He'd gotten something. The fisherman and I walked over to watch. Henry put everything he had into pulling his catch up until finally, with a mighty pull, he yanked it straight out of the river. Droplets of water flew into the air, sparkling in the sun like diamonds. His battle won, he hoisted his prize up to get a better look. A boot! Henry's face popped up with indignation. He angrily tossed the boot to the ground and sulked for a few minutes before he cast another line. Eventually he caught some smaller fish, and I prepared them as bait for the metal rod trident. I cast my new line and waited. 10 minutes later, I felt a sharp tug on the line. My rod started to bend. Oh, it's a fucking honker, dude. A shadow appeared in the water, and the surface of the river began to thrash. I waited until the line stopped moving and tugged with all my strength. A huge fish flew up from the river. I dragged it up to the shore and held it for everyone to see. The fisherman, impressed by its size, let out a whistle. Those long whiskers and pointed teeth, he mumbled to himself, and he took a good look at the fish. That's definitely a garvazel. Is it rare? I asked. It's rare to catch one here, he said. Still examined the fish. They're known as lake bottom brawlers, and true to the name, they're usually found in muddy areas at the bottom of lakes. I was elated to have caught such a rare fish, but the fisherman's expression was more serious. Something wrong? I asked. I'd like to make a request. The fisherman straightened his posture. Would you let me have this garvazel? Henry and I looked at each other in shock. Hey, you never say anything about charging us. Henry glared at the fisherman. Don't misunderstand, please, the fisherman said. I'm not trying to scam you or anything of the sort. I just want to get this fish back with me to the Fisherman's Guild. Trying to add someone else's catch to your collection? Henry's brow was furrowed. That's pretty lame when you say. Oh, I agree. It's not the reason I want it, though, said the fisherman, still bearing the same serious expression on his face. I'm interested in the ecosystem here. I'd like to find out why a lake-dwelling fish is all the way out here. Also, he continued, the fish has a bit of a reputation as a man-eater. A what? Henry jumped a good arc away from the fishes that flopped on the end of my line. It's only an urban legend, said the fisherman. They cough up trinkets from time to time. If you happen to have eaten anything valuable, I'll let you have it. How does that sound for payment? I mean, I doubt it could eat a whole person, right? It's just a fish. I mean, how big a fish we talking? Maybe like a small kid. But like, even if it's like a big fish, it's not gonna eat a whole person. They're trying to bribe us some dead man's jewelry? Henry exclaimed from behind a nearby tree. No, please listen, the fisherman remained calm. The man-eating part isn't true. The fish will just follow shiny objects that fall to the bottom of the lake. Yeah, likely story, Henry still regarded the fisherman with a suspicious glance. He then turned to me. What should we do? I had no reason to trust this random fisherman, but he didn't sound like the kind of person who would lie to us. Alright, I said, you can have it. Thank you, I mean you're dead. He took off his hat and gave me a short bow. Where will I be able to find you to deliver your payment? We're usually in the restaurant in town, I told him. There's only one restaurant? Understood, I'll be back in a few days, the fisherman said as he began to pack up his supplies. I need to transport this fish quickly, so I'll head back out now. So I'll be headed out now. I took another look at the fish. Will this fish die from the research you're going to do? I asked. The fisherman simply laughed at my expression. Oh no, I'll see to it he's well taken care of. He waved to us one last time before heading off, the fish in tow. You think it's a good idea to trust that guy? Henry asked as we watched. Like, why do you care if the fish dies? Like, you were planning on eating it. Now, of course, it's probably better to eat it, or, you know, to have it be killed so you can eat it, rather than it just be killed for research purposes. But, like, it's not that different. You know there's a chance we'll never see him again, right? Bet that fish is happy and went to someone like him, I said, mostly to myself. What are you talking about, man? Said Henry, raising an eyebrow at me. You're right, he never comes back. I shrugged, and that's just how it is. We'll just have to go fishing again. Just like that? Henry sighed. I'm a little jealous how nonchalant you are about it. You know why I like Clementine so much, Henry? I asked. Huh? Henry seemed taken aback by my question. I have no idea why myself, I admitted. That's just how it is. With that, we started packing up and heading home. Henry was silent for the entire trip back. Yeah, there's no way this could end poorly. Chapter 6. Things I want to protect. Actually, let's get some water first. Memories are strange things. I heard you speaking to me from far away. We make memories both good and bad, and then without realizing it, we forget them. I said nothing, but it seemed like the angry, sad, and bitter memories are the ones that stick around the longest. I remained silent. If that's true, then I want you to be by my side for every clumsy mistake and awful day I have, because I want to remember every moment I spend with you. Edgar? The voice struck my mind like ripples on a still lake, and my consciousness slowly returned to me. I was walking through the canyon. Clementine was at my side. We had just finished delivering food to the Bracers training facility, and we were on our way back to town. Sorry, I was just lost in thought, I said, rubbing my temples. Clementine put her hand to my forehead to check my temperature. Well, it seems like you don't have a fever or anything, but if you're not feeling well, you should rest. She grinned at me and continued walking ahead. Watching her, I wished this moment would never end. Why'd you ask me to come with you that day? The vision I had of you speaking to me, was it real, or was it just a wishful daydream? Hey Edgar, what's your favorite food? Clementine turned to look at me as we reached the highway. I thought about it. Anything you make for me. That's such an Edgar answer, she giggled. Okay, then I'll make you some once we get back. You should have said Clementine's, come on. Really, that sounds great, I said. I'm really looking forward to it. Is there anything you don't like, she asked. Not really, I said, thinking it over. I eat, pretty much anything. That must be nice, she said, smiling. Do you like tomatoes too, then? Yep, tomatoes too, I nodded. The words felt like a faint memory, like a tickle at the back of my mind. I just can't stand them myself, she said, shaking her head. After all, you don't like tomatoes. When I was little, my father tried to feed me a tomato, she told me. You spat it out? And I just spat it right back at him. The scene suddenly bubbled up in my mind again. Edgar? And you have no idea why, but you can't just eat them, right? I asked. What? She let out a small gasp. Yeah, that's right, but how'd you know? Just a guess, I said, looking away. I'm not a stalker or nothing. I remember the scene I saw back in the restaurant. Her words just now were the same as back then. I think I understand now, I mumbled to myself. It had been installed in my mind. Understand what? What are you talking about, Edgar? She asked. Concern creeping across her face, she grabbed my arm and looked up to me. Is Edgar a robot? Is that it? Is that why he's Heartless Edgar? Before I could say anything, several figures rushed at us from the grass off the side of the highway. Monsters! Clementine yelled. 3 feline monsters stood before us, blocking the road into town and hissing angrily. Edgar! Clementine whispered my name. She was trembling. I calmly moved her behind me. If they're on the highway, I said, that means the nearby orbital lights must be broken. What do we do? She clutched my arm tighter. We can't get into town, so let's go back the way we came, I said. Clementine looked like she was about to cry. I grasped her hand and held it tight. The Bracers will be able to help, I told her. We just need to go back there, okay? She nodded. Together we turned and started running as fast as we could. We ran for what felt like forever. I lost track of how far we'd gone. Clementine was running out of breath. The sun was nearly done setting, and what little light remained in the dusky sky couldn't reach down into the canyon. We stopped for a moment, and Clementine steadied herself against the canyon wall to catch her breath. I'm sorry I'm slowing you down, she gasped. No, I'm the one who should apologize, I said. I thought we would have found the Bracers by now. At that point, I didn't even know which direction the training facility was anymore. Panic from the constant sound of pursuing footsteps had muddled my sense of direction. If we can rest for a minute, I can. Clementine's thought was interrupted by the sight of one of the monsters leaping at her. She screamed. I grabbed a nearby branch and swung at it as hard as I could. I knocked it out of the air right before it reached her. Home run. However, while I was preoccupied with the first one, 2 more circled around behind us. I felt Several sharp claws dig into me, one of the monsters on my back and the other on my leg. I turned and swung the branch again, knocking them away. It leapt to me once more, however, going after my head and shoulder next. The world became a blur. I swung the branch, hitting one directly in the head. It flew off a short ways and stopped moving. Clementine stood at the side, watching in fear, her hands pressed tightly over her mouth. One of the monsters started to approach her, and I kicked it away. While I did, however, the one behind me leapt at the back of my head, tearing into me. Everything grew dim, and I fell to my knees. My ears were filled with the monster's piercing screeches, mixed with the sound of Clementine, desperately calling my name. The last thing I heard before the world went dark was the sound of boots and loud, commanding voices. Chapter 7. No Blood to Shed. All I could do was call his name as I watched him fall to his knees. He glanced at me, his eyes telling me to run away before he slumped to the ground. I ran to his side before I could check on him. I noticed the two remaining monsters slinking towards us. The branch he had dropped was much too heavy for me to use. I started screaming as loud as I could, begging for anyone to come save us. After a moment, I heard heavy footsteps running towards us and a voice call out, "Over here!" A group of bracers ran up, easily taking care of the monsters that had terrorized us. "Sorry it took so long. Are you injured?" asked a female bracer. I shook my head at her, but then turned to look at Edgar lying on the ground. The bracers crowded around to check on him. This guy, what is this? Do we take him to a hospital, or? I only hear bits of their whispered conversation. "We'll take the man back first," one of the bracers told me as they started to move Edgar. "Is he gonna be okay?" I asked. We can't say," the bracer said, looking away. They carried Edgar away before I could even get a glimpse of him. The rest of the bracers stayed behind to escort me out of the canyon. "We're sorry you had to go through that. We'll get these orbit lights fixed as soon as possible," the female bracer said. She told me her name was Bella. When we finally got to the restaurant, Bella looked at me with a solemn expression on her face. "I'd like to apologize again for not getting there sooner," she lowered her gaze, "but that young man protected you, didn't he?" "Edgar's a strong person," I said, forcing a sad smile. After what felt like a long silence, one of the other bracers spoke up. "His name was Edgar? I thought he looked familiar. He was that guy with the bag full of mushrooms." The bracer introduced himself to me as Boris. "He was trying to pick a ton of mushrooms back with him, but he picked them all from restricted areas, so we had to confiscate them all." "Yeah," Bella said, "he was very reluctant to give up that firefly fungus. He said someone important to him wanted it." "That reminds me," said Boris. "I first saw him when we broke up that fight here at the restaurant. He told me he was trying to protect someone." I wondered if he was talking about the same person, Bella mused. She turned to look at me. "Are you okay?" Tears were streaming down my face. "Oh," she said, realizing what was going on. She hugged me. "We'll do whatever we can to make sure he recovers." Even so, I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. The next morning, I took the day off and headed to the hospital. I gave them Edgar's name at the front desk and asked for his room number. To my surprise, they told me they couldn't find him. I asked them to check again, and they eventually found a nurse who was there the day before. She told me Edgar was brought in, but was quickly moved to another location. So I headed straight there. In no time, I was standing before the Epstein Foundation's Intellectual Development Research Center. This didn't seem like the kind of place anyone would take an injured person to be treated, so why was Edgar brought here? I steeled my courage and walked into the building. Inside were a number of people wearing white lab coats and exchanging information on clipboards. I was completely out of my element, but kept going anyway. I spotted a reception desk and approached the woman sitting there. "I was told a man named Edgar was brought here," I said. The receptionist looked at me as though I'd grown a second head. "They told me at the hospital that an injured man named Edgar was brought here last night," I repeated, a little more firmly. "Which room is he in?" "I haven't heard of anyone like that being brought here," she furrowed her brow at me. "If you can't at least tell me where he is, can you not at least let me know if he's here or not?" I told her. "I'll wait here as long as I need to." "I'm sorry, miss, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said, glaring at me. "Like I said, I'm going to wait right here until you tell me where he is," I repeated, raising my voice a little. My outburst caused some of the others in the lobby to stop and turn their heads. Suddenly I heard a voice from behind me. "You're right, he's here." "Of course I'm right." I turned and let out a short gasp. The voice belonged to Henry. He was wearing a wrinkled lab coat, and his long scraggly hair was tied back in a ponytail. "So glad to see you," I breathed a sigh of relief. "I'll take care of things from here," Henry said to the still irritated receptionist. He led me further back into the building. "Have you seen Edgar?" I asked, unable to hold back my anxiousness. "Yeah," he replied. "But seeing him's about all you can do at the moment." We stopped in front of a large, sturdy door. Henry swiped a keycard on a reader, and the door slowly opened. Inside was a long, dark hallway. At the end of the hallway was a small room surrounded by thick glass walls. As we approached, I saw him lying on a white slab inside the glass room. "Edgar!" I called out. Two mechanical arms suspended from the ceiling circled his body, shooting out small bursts of sparks here and there. "What's going on, Henry?" I asked as I watched in horror. "They're fixing him," he responded, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. His brain was especially damaged. So you replaced his body with machinery? I asked, struggling to understand the situation. Henry didn't respond. He stood there and calmly watched the arms circle around Edgar. This is just a little too much, I said. All these machines. I put my hand on the glass between Edgar and me. He got hurt protecting me, I said, so if you can use my body to help him somehow, or... I just didn't know what I should do. Just please, I started to choke up. Please, bring him back to me. Bring him back to normal. I promised him I'd cook something for him, so please. You don't have to worry about that. His voice was so cold and clinical, it took me a moment to realize it was Henry speaking. He hadn't taken his eyes off Edgar the whole time. Why do you think he wasn't afraid of fighting that big drunk? He asked me. How could he keep running that whole time without getting tired? Why didn't he bleed a single drop of blood after all those monsters clawed him? Didn't you think it was strange? I looked at Edgar as he lay on the slab. His tranquil expression was illuminated by the sterile white light shining down from above. We didn't replace his body with machinery, Henry said quietly. He was like this from the start. He shed no tears, no blood courses through his body, and no heart beats in his chest. But he's not a normal machine. He's an artificial intelligence wearing human skin. Chapter 8, Don't Let Go. I don't understand, I stammered. What are you talking about? My head spun as I struggled to comprehend the reality of the situation. Henry turned to look at me and began explaining. Artificial intelligence, a machine that works like a human brain. He's far more advanced than a simple automated contraption. I stood there silently in a daze. The Epstein Foundation has made a lot of advancement in this area recently, he continued. Right now we're focusing on situation assessment and language skills. I couldn't find any words to respond to him. The body is a device that functions like a stomach, so he can even eat too. He didn't get any nourishment from it exactly, Henry said, shrugging, but it was important for him to at least act like a human. You're wrong, I squeezed the words out of my throat. Huh? He's not a machine, I said. Henry's expression didn't change. How could someone so kind be a machine? I continued. He liked talking with us and sharing meals, and he said he wanted to be there for me, and I could tell he really meant it. He's so much like a real person. Precisely, Henry said, calmly. He is like a real person. What? No, that's not what I mean, I protested. One of our goals in building him was to create a machine that would be as close to human as possible. Henry explained. The experiment was to discover whether or not an artificial intelligence could experience emotion. I could feel my pulse quicken and my breath catch in my throat. What does that mean then, I gasped? Edgar's thoughts, his feelings? Are you telling me everything about him was just installed into his mind? That's right, Henry said with the same cold tone. It was for the sake of our research and for further development of this technology. You were randomly chosen to serve as subject. It was all nothing more than an experiment. No. I started to feel dizzy. Does Edgar know? I asked, steadying myself against a wall. He knows what he is, Henry explained as he gazed at Edgar, but he wasn't told he was part of this experiment. That's interesting. I kind of assumed he didn't know. Nor was he aware, Henry turned to me, of the reason he liked you so much. How could you? I asked, my anger starting to build. How could you know all that and just sit by and watch him? Henry remained silent and turned his gaze back to Edgar. You're his best friend, aren't you? I continued. You two did everything together. How could you betray him like this? You still don't get it. Henry's words were cold and sharp. Between humans and machines, friendship, let alone love, is impossible. The experiment needed an observer. Our friendship was nothing more than a scenario to facilitate that. All I did was play the role I was given. Henry sighed. He suddenly looked exhausted. You understand now? He asked. Edgar is an intricately constructed machine made to mimic a human. There were so many things I wanted to say, but I couldn't manage to force any words out. A gentle face of his kind voice, the feeling of his hand gripping mine as we ran. Didn't all those things come from Edgar himself? Were they really all engineered in a lab? I had to accept reality, but the more I thought about it, the more my mind resisted the thought. I regained my composure and faced Henry. He looked at me with cold eyes, but behind that clinical icy stare, I felt like I could sense something else. Sadness, maybe. Are you really okay with that? I finally spoke. Can you just pretend all the days you spent with Edgar never really happened? None of them were ever real to begin with, he replied. Can you forget everything he said to you? I asked, the look on his face as you two talked with each other. Every meal you shared with him? Henry didn't respond. He silently turned his back towards Edgar. As he gazed through the glass at his friend's profile, the sadness in his eyes returned. After a few moments, he spoke. Edgar was always honest and loyal, he said. Quietly, he cared about us, and he brought people together. Once I realized that, there was no doubt in my mind he had become human. Henry slowly closed his eyes and gently touched his fingertips against the cold glass. There was one thing we didn't expect to happen. On the other side of the glass, one of the mechanical arms stopped moving. It was where his personality developed to such a degree. At some point, he began to feel like a human himself. The other mechanical arm stopped and the room fell silent. I was running through a thick fog. Someone was holding my hand, pulling me forward. I was in the forest. Yes, this must have been the case. Where was Clementine? Had the braces come for us? Did she make it back to town safely? I had to hurry. No, not that way. Wait, who are you? Where are we going? What are you going to do with me? Then I woke up. Guess we'll get some more wine. I actually really like this one. I think it's like maybe it's so far it's probably like the overall best book of all the books in the series. Chapter 9, A Sleepless Dream. I awoke to find myself lying on a workbench. Hey, you're finally awake, I heard someone say. I turned my head to see Henry enter the room. I tried to sit up, my movements were sluggish. That's weird, I said. I'm having difficulty moving. Well, you did just come out of major surgery, Henry said. The back of your head was injured pretty bad. I reached back and touched a spot above the nape of my neck. I felt sutures there. That was where the core of me was, the part that made me Edgar. What about Clementine, I asked. Is she okay? Just a few scratches, Henry told me. She's fine. Good. I breathed a sigh of relief. So the bracers made it in time? Henry nodded with a soft smirk. I want to see her, I told him. Is it safe for me to move? I didn't wait for a response, however. By the time the words had left my mouth, I had already gotten down off the workbench and begun quietly walking towards the door. I told her, Henry said quietly. About you? The words stopped me in my tracks. She came here to see you after she couldn't find you at the hospital, he said. He was really letting the receptionist have it. And? I asked. I took her to see you while you were getting repaired, he said, averting his gaze. She told me she understood and then left. Told me she knew there was something off about you. I started laughing. What? Said Henry, taken aback by my reaction. You're a terrible liar, Henry, I said. We both know she'd never say something like that. He looked to the floor and let out a little sigh. I'm sure she was shocked, though, I continued. I imagine it would be a lot to take in. I sat back down on the workbench. You're pretty calm about all this, Henry said. One of the benefits of being a machine, I guess. As he said this, I saw a hint of pain and sadness in his eyes. Why didn't you take me back to the dorm after I was fixed, I asked. Why did you try and stop me from seeing Clementine? And why are you acting so strange right now? I can't understand. I ran my fingers through my indigo hair, then down to my neck, covered in lifelike, yet synthetic skin. My hand came to rest on the sutures. After all, I'm just artificial intelligence. Henry fell silent. I realized something while I was working with Clementine, I told him. Information about her was installed in my mind, the kind of food she doesn't like, stories from her childhood, even images of her smiling face. It was just random information to get me focused on her, I continued. Or at least that's all it was supposed to be. I guess something unexpected happened. Henry continued to stand there silently, listening to me. Those times where my head felt muddled and I had strange visions, I went on. Those were my own hopes getting mixed in there, weren't they? My own desires, wanting to talk to her, wanting to be with her. Henry didn't say anything, but I could still see the sadness in his eyes. Does any of that change just gonna happen now? I asked. You're pretty chatty after your surgery, huh? Henry said, quickly putting on a tired smile. The experiment you're a part of is over now, he said as he walked towards me. This stage of it anyway. The results show some danger. He stopped right in front of me and looked me in the eyes. They've decided up top that an AI that develops self-consciousness is too difficult to manage, he said. Your thought data is going to be removed and analyzed, and you'll be given a new personality and appearance. After that, the experiment will continue. What about you, Henry? I asked. Is that what you want? It is, he said, averting his gaze again. You're nothing but trouble. I signed up for this experiment to advance my career. Why else would I babysit some artificial intelligence? Now that the experiment's done over, my job here is done. Something too difficult to manage, I asked. Is that what you think, Henry? Yeah, he said. You almost got your face punched in trying to fight some drunk. You made me chase after you on some hunt for mushrooms we weren't even sure existed. Then you dragged me out to go catch some rare fish and ended up giving it away. I had it up to here with you. His voice wavered and his face scrunched up as though he was trying to hold something back. I understand, I said. I'll do what you tell me to do, Henry. What? He started. I'm not going along with what the Foundation wants, I told him. I'm just taking my friend's advice. What about Clementine, he asked. I shouldn't see her, I said. It's for the best. What? All of a sudden... He stammered. Where's that calm, scientific demeanor you had a moment ago? I gave him a small smile. You should hurry up before I change my mind. Henry closed his eyes and his face scrunched up again. No matter what happens to me, I still think he was my friend. That's all, I said as I lay back down on the workbench. Edgar. Henry's voice wavered. Feels like it's been a while since I've heard you say my name, I said. He turned away and began preparing the equipment. I could hear the machinery begin to hum around me. I felt my body getting lighter, threatening to float away. My eyes were open, but I couldn't see anything. I felt like I was the only one there. Suddenly I felt a pen and paper in my hands. Henry must have brought them to me to write a letter. I had no idea where to start, though. There was so much I wanted to say, but I didn't know where to begin. My hand holding the pen started shaking. The only lines that made it to the paper were worthless scribbles. I needed to thank her. I needed to tell her I was sorry, and also... It was evening. I was at the restaurant, working like always. I had nowhere else to go. My work kept my mind occupied. It was only a few hours ago that I was in the building when I saw Edgar's eyes open. I ignored Henry calling after me and ran out of the room. We were never going to be able to see each other again. I thought it would be best if he didn't see me there. I couldn't pretend it had never happened, but I needed to forget. I decided that was the only way I could keep myself going. Excuse me, miss. A voice from behind me shook me out of my thoughts. Sorry, I said. I'll be right there with you. I quickly wiped the tears from my eyes and turned around. A middle-aged man was standing at the entrance to the restaurant. Well, now we have to load our save to see the thrilling conclusion. I guess we'll load, I need one after... I need one on the final chapter. There we go. So we'll have the most hype music for reading the finale. The hypest reading music the world could ever see.
My turn.
Don't worry, Kurt Vander will still be your narrator. We're not gonna take that away from him at the last second. And we might forget where books are. There we go at the top. Alright, finale. Heartless Edgar. Is a young man named Edgar here? The man asked me. Hearing the name brought a sudden sharp pain to my chest. He told me I could usually find him at this restaurant, he continued. I started to tell him, but I stopped myself. He isn't here today. That's a shame, he said. How about Henry? I shook my head. He let out a disappointed sigh. Well, if you see either of them, could you let them know I'll be at the inn? As he turned to leave, I noticed his jacket had an emblem with a fish on it. I promised him I would, but after he left, I regretted not telling him Edgar wouldn't be coming back. That night, I closed the restaurant without seeing Edgar. And it occurred to me that every night would be like this from now on. I felt an emptiness inside of me. Bro, it does not fit in the slightest, the music. I mean, I think we could... I think we get this during that part when you're exploring Heimdall, so we could have maybe loaded that one, but... Closing for the day, huh? I heard a voice as I locked the front door and turned to go home. It was Henry. What do you want? I couldn't figure out if seeing him made me more sad or angry. He didn't say anything. He just handed me a folded slip of paper. I didn't read it, he said quietly. I expected him to leave, but he just turned his back on me and stood there. I opened up the paper. It was covered in shaky writing. This is the first letter I've ever written. I can't seem to organize my thoughts, so please forgive me. Machines don't know how to forget. You can faithfully record data or faithfully delete it, that's all. I thought that for someone like me, forgetting would be as easy as simple as deleting a file, not something to regret or mourn. But as I write this now, I'm filled with a strange feeling, like I don't want to forget. It's because I met you. You, who accepted me, despite the fact that I have no blood in my veins and no heart in my chest. You saw me not as a machine, but as a person. You brought love and beauty into this life of being a simple puppet. Thank you. I'm sure it must be disappointing for us to part like this, and I'm sorry for that. The lie I've lived is too big to beg your forgiveness for. I can only ask that you don't be angry with Henry. Finally, I want to express the feeling I've been holding in my heart since I first met you. May you find all the happiness in the world. That is my true prayer for you. I fell to my knees, crying, gripping the letter in my hands. I couldn't stop my tears, and I didn't care if my sobbing echoed throughout the dark streets. I didn't care if anyone saw me or what they thought. Edgar, I forced the name out through my sobs. Hearing me, Henry turned around. His eyes were puffy, and he had a pained expression. Please, I looked up at him. Help me. He met my gaze. He hesitated. I understand. I stood alone in front of the door Henry had brought me to. Once we had gotten there, he told me it was as far as he could take me. As he turned to leave, I told him about the man who had come to visit the restaurant. Henry's expression grew serious, but he said nothing and continued walking. None of that mattered now. I took a deep breath and stepped through the door. Who are you? The room was filled with researchers in white lab coats. They were huddled on a workbench. Lying on top of the workbench was Edgar. How'd you get in here? Shouted one of the researchers. This is a restricted area. Undeterred, I walked forward. Give me Edgar, I told them. Several of them looked at each other and chuckled. Oh, you're that girl who was here the other day, said one. Know that all of Edgar's data has already been extracted for analysis, said another. The Edgar you know doesn't exist anymore. His feelings are real, I said, my voice cracking. No, said a researcher, that's not possible because he's an artificial intelligence and they are not human. They're simply tools, compilations of technology and techniques. Are tools the only thing you care about, I asked? The only things you can see? What are you talking about, said the researcher. Do you even try and see the bonds he created? I pointed to Edgar, the circle of people he brought together. Feel the same way, said a voice from behind me. The man who had visited the restaurant earlier entered the room. He and I still have things to discuss, he said. I need to thank him for helping me. Another civilian exclaimed one of the researchers. What's security doing? It doesn't matter what you say, said another. We're not going to stop our research for such sentimental reasons. That's right, chimed in yet another one. You can't change our decision. Well, sentimental arguments won't work, we'll just have to go through more official channels, won't we? A deep voice reverberated throughout the room as a pair of footsteps approached from the... Oh, because he's like a real person, so he's a citizen. Or civilian, and they gotta protect him. The Bracers Guild received an official request from the Fisherman's Guild for the return of Edgar. The man held out his bracer badge. It seems we made it just in time, the woman with him let out a sigh. Yeah, I didn't think we'd be helping him out again so soon. It was Boris and Bella. Upon hearing Boris's words, the researcher's expressions changed. Now, do you see how many people care about Edgar? I stepped forward. I'm begging you, please give him back to us. We cannot reinforce this. I started to shirk back. But think of the risks one seeing. But if an artificial intelligence develops its own will, it can no longer be controlled. Yes, she said. If we can't control him, there's no telling what he might do. Someone else may even take him and use him for malicious purposes. But I started. Even in the face of all our support, they still refused to return him to us. We refused to give up too, however. In the middle of our standoff, a familiar voice broke the silence. Then let me make a suggestion. After what felt like a long time, I slowly opened my bleary eyes. My mind felt hazy, my body was sluggish. I lay there, staring at the ceiling of my dorm room for a bit. Before turning to the side, there I saw Clementine sitting next to my bed. Her eyes were full of tears, but she was smiling more brightly than I'd ever seen her. I found out what happened later. Thanks to everyone, my personality was re-uploaded back into my body. I was allowed to keep living as Edgar, so long as I didn't leave town. Clementine had agreed to stay with me when we confined to the town as well. She said that didn't matter, however, as long as we could be together. But the morning after that, I'll never forget the words you said to me, the ones I always wanted to hear you say. Good morning, Edgar. I don't know, that was just like really solid, like, all together. I mean, not necessarily like, you know, super unique story per se, but definitely just simple and well done. I have like no real complaints or issues with it at all. I thought the dialogue is pretty well written. I like the back and forth between Edgar and Henry, and the kind of like weird first, second person narration at times is kind of cool. Oh, that, I mean, I can't think of any others that I really liked more than that one. I mean, I really like the, whoops. Yeah, begin the final battle. Nope. And that fight sucks. Nope, not doing that. I mean, I really like the I can't remember what it was actually called. But the one with Toval? What's the name of that one? I can't actually remember the name of that book, but that was probably my favorite of the in-game books. But I don't know, I really like the Heartless Edgar one. Definitely, you know, not as like important from like a lore or story perspective per se, considering, you know, it's set 100 years in the future. I mean, there's probably going to be robots introduced into this, or, you know, I mean, they kind of already are somewhat in the series with Milliam and Altina, and I mean, they're presented more as like magical homunculi, but for all intents and purposes, they're not that much different than being like a robot AI. But I would not be surprised in the slightest if that gets introduced properly into the series at some point.
Victory is assured.
Yeah, so says Kurt Vander. We're at an hour. I'm trying to think, do I want to just go ahead and read these as well? So it's either 4, 9, 11 pages. They're a little too long to throw in this video. So we'll do one extra shorter bonus video, reading the little side short stories. And then I think that'll be it. I was asked to record a reaction video to like a meme video about the Trail series, and I will do that. I don't know where that's going to go though. I think I'm probably going to either include that at the end of the finale so you've already seen it, or it'll be part of the LP Reflections video. I haven't yet decided. And I'm also, like, just to give a little insight into my thought process, I'm a little conflicted on like how best to do that, because I don't really want to do it as a standalone video because it just feels weird. Like, I don't know. I mean, I doubt it would be like an issue or anything, but it just kind of, I don't know. It just feels like I'm stealing someone else's content, basically. even though, I mean, I know reaction videos are like a very commonly accepted thing for the most part, it just, I'm a little leery on doing it, but I'm going to do it. I think it'll be a fun time, but especially considering how much I complained about the CS3 ending, which I'm still coming to terms with. I haven't really... I've been thinking about... I'm brainstorming the reflections video. I haven't started writing anything down yet, but I'm definitely like less viscerally negative on it, which is just always what's going to happen as like time fades. You get, you know, it's less of a letdown, I suppose, as opposed to in the exact moment. I'm still not, you know, super on board with it, aside from the fade to black, or the cut to black ending. That part's still badass. That's super cool, but... And, like, I do like that they did that after that was, like, one of my complaints with CS2's ending, was that I was like, if they had done that after Osborn was like, yo, I'm your dad, fucking cut to black, GG, here's your credits, talk to us in a couple years when the sequel comes out, I still think that would have been super cool. And so I'm kind of glad they did that for CS3. Now, my opinion on that is, of course, colored by the fact that I could launch Cold Steel 4 right now if I wanted to. So, it's a little bit easier to be, like, excited over a sudden cliffhanger ending like that when you can, you know, see the resolution immediately if you want, or, like, start seeing the resolution, and you're not having to wait years, but... Alright, that's kind of a topic for another time, but we'll do another video reading the little side books. Probably be a shorter one, but... It'll definitely be a shorter one, but overall, Heartless Edgar, really good. Quite impressed with it. I'm ExtraCheesy87. Stay tuned for the next and final bonus video. And then, before you know it, we'll be starting CS4. Bye, guys.